Notification sound from my phone cuts through the noise of the restaurant kitchen, a sharp ping I've learned to ignore during a dinner rush. But it's my brother's name on the screen, and even after 3 years of near silence, my stomach still does that old familiar clench. I don't read it. I slide the phone back into my apron pocket and carry the plates out. That's actually where this story ends. But you probably need to know how it started. My grandmother, Ruth, had a saying she repeated so often it stopped meaning anything until she was gone. A quiet woman keeps her own counsel. She was the kind of person who noticed everything and said very little. She watched, she waited, and apparently, she planned. I didn't know about the trust fund until I was 23. That detail matters. My name is Serena. I'm the younger of two kids, and from as far back as I can remember, the household operated on an unspoken rule. My brother Garrett got the soft landing, and I got the lesson. When Garrett forgot to fill out his college applications on time, my dad spent 2 weekends helping him appeal to 3 schools. When I got waitlisted at my first choice, my mom handed me the laptop and said, "Figure it out." I did. I enrolled at a state school on partial scholarship and worked 20 hours a week to cover the rest. I thought that was just how families worked. Some kids get the car. Some kids get the character building experience. Looking back, I think I accepted a lot of things I shouldn't have. The dinner where everything changed happened on a Saturday in late May. Garrett had just finished his MBA. My parents threw him a party, catered, not potluck, with the good tablecloths my mom only used for Christmas. I drove 2 hours to be there. I'd taken the weekend off from both my jobs, which cost me about $400 in lost wages, but it was family, and I still believed in showing up. We were at the table when my dad stood up. He clinked his glass the way men do when they've been waiting all evening for this moment. He talked about hard work and dedication and legacy. Words that in my family always seemed to flow more easily toward Garrett than anywhere else. Then he reached under the table and slid a small box across to my brother. Car keys, a used but recent model SUV, fully paid for, parked in the driveway. "Because you earned it," my dad said. My brother grinned the way he always did when things went his way, easily, like he'd expected it. I smiled too. I clapped. I was good at that. Then my dad turned to me. I thought maybe there was something for me too. I was foolish enough to think that. "Serena," he said, "we've been meaning to talk to you about your living situation." I rented a room in a shared house 40 minutes from my parents. It was small and the heating was inconsistent, and I was perfectly fine with it because I paid for it myself. "You should move back home," my mom said. "Save money. It would make sense." That part sounded reasonable. The next part didn't. "If you're living here, contributing to the household is fair," my dad said. "We're thinking $800 a month." I looked around the table. Garrett was looking at his phone. My mom was refilling her wine glass. The catering staff was clearing plates. Everyone was behaving as if this was completely normal. Asking your daughter to pay rent at the same dinner you just handed your son a car. What?" I said. "You're 25, Serena," my dad said. "This is what responsibility looks like." I drove home that night without eating dessert. I sat in the parking lot of my apartment building for a long time. I wasn't crying. I was just very quiet, the way my grandmother used to be, before she said something that mattered. My grandmother, Ruth, had died 14 months before that dinner. Ovarian cancer, quick and cruel. She'd been the one person in my family who talked to me like I was worth the effort. Who asked about my plans not to redirect them, but because she actually wanted to know. When she got sick, I took every Saturday I could and drove to her house in Delaware. I'd sit with her, watch old movies, eat soup she was too tired to finish. Garrett visited twice. My parents came when it was convenient. At her funeral, her attorney, a quiet man named Arthur, handed me a card and said I should call his office the following week. I assumed it was about her personal effects. She'd mentioned leaving me some of her books and a jewelry box that had belonged to her mother. What he told me on that phone call was that my grandmother had set up an educational and personal development trust in my name when I was born. The trust was worth just over $230,000 and had been accumulating interest for 25 years. She'd appointed my father as trustee. The trust had a release date, my 25th birthday. My 25th birthday had been 7 months earlier. "I haven't received anything," I told Arthur. There was a pause. "Let me pull the file," he said. What followed was 3 weeks of phone calls I made from my car during my lunch breaks. Because I worked in an open plan office, and I did not want anyone to hear me slowly understanding that my father had been managing my trust fund for years. Arthur was careful with his words. He said there had been several significant disbursements from the trust over the past decade that he was not fully briefed on. He said the remaining balance was considerably lower than the projected value. He said I should strongly consider speaking with an attorney of my own. I didn't tell my parents I knew. Not yet. I called a lawyer, a woman named Patricia, who specialized in estate and trust litigation and who had a small office above a dry cleaner in Wilmington. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and spoke to me like she'd heard every version of this story before. She probably had. Patricia helped me request a full accounting of the trust, every transaction, every disbursement, every authorization, going back to when I was in high school. The documents took 6 weeks to arrive. When I opened the envelope at my kitchen table at midnight, I made myself a cup of tea first. I don't know why. Ritual, maybe. The trust had been drawn down in 12 separate transactions. The first was in 2013, when I was 16. The last was 9 months ago, 3 months after my grandmother's funeral. 2 months after my 25th birthday had come and gone without a word from my father about any trust fund. The disbursements totaled $184,000. Patricia walked me through what each one corresponded to. Garrett's undergraduate tuition. Garrett's apartment deposit when he moved to Chicago for his first job. Garrett's MBA tuition. 2 years at a private university. Not cheap. A down payment on a condo my parents had purchased in 2019. Home renovations in 2021. My grandmother's money, set aside for me, spent on everyone else. I sat at that table for a long time. My tea went cold. I want to be honest about what I felt, because I think people expect rage, and what I actually felt was something quieter and heavier. I felt the specific grief of realizing that something you'd been told wasn't there had actually always been there, that someone had stood between you and it for years. I thought about all the nights I'd picked up extra shifts at the restaurant to cover a car repair, or eaten cereal for dinner for a week so I could pay rent on time. I thought about calling my mom when my check engine light came on and her telling me I needed to learn to manage money. I thought about my dad's speech about responsibility at Garrett's graduation party. I did not call my parents. I did not call my parents. I did not call Garrett. I told Patricia to move forward. I moved out of my shared house that October and into a studio apartment closer to my better-paying job. I didn't tell my parents about the move until I had already signed the lease. When my mom called to ask about Thanksgiving, I said I had plans. She said, "With who?" I said, "Friends." She said, "Serena, are you okay?" I said, "I'm great, Mom. I'll talk to you soon." I was very calm on those calls. Patricia had advised me not to discuss anything related to the trust before we filed, and calm came naturally to me by that point. I'd had years of practice at appearing unbothered. My dad texted me a few times. Once about Thanksgiving, once to say he hoped I was taking care of myself, once to forward me an article about financial planning. I read all of them. I replied to none of them. The filing landed in November. I won't walk you through every stage of the legal process because it was slow and expensive, and there were weeks where I genuinely did not know if I had enough to keep going. Patricia was worth every dollar. She documented everything. The unauthorized disbursements, the failure to provide required annual accountings, the fact that my father had continued drawing from the trust for 8 months past my 25th birthday, which was the automatic release date. He had no legal authority to touch that money after my birthday. He had done it anyway. Patricia also uncovered that my father had, at some point, created a document he'd backdated, a supposed loan agreement between the trust and Garrett, as if my brother had borrowed the money for his MBA with the intent to repay it. The agreement was signed by my father in his capacity as trustee and countersigned by Garrett. There was no such agreement when the disbursement was made. Patricia found the metadata. My brother had signed a fraudulent document. I thought about the 2 visits he'd made to our grandmother when she was dying. I thought about his easy grin at the party. I thought about how he'd looked at his phone when my father told me I'd be paying rent to live in the house I grew up in. He knew. Maybe not everything, but he knew something. The case settled before it went to full trial, which Patricia said was common in trust litigation when the documentation was this clear. My father's attorney tried to argue that the disbursements were informal loans and that the family had a shared understanding that expenses would be repaid. Patricia presented the original trust documents, which contained no such provision. She presented the wire transfer records. She presented the backdated loan agreement and the metadata that disproved it. My father settled for the full remaining value of the trust, calculated with compound interest from my 25th birthday, plus legal fees. In a separate agreement, Garrett committed to a repayment schedule for the amount attributed to his education costs. His father covered the rest. The settlement also required my father to resign from his position as a financial advisor at the firm where he'd worked for 18 years. His professional licenses were reviewed by the state board. I don't know the full outcome of that review, because it happened in a separate process I was not party to. What I do know is that my father no longer works as a financial advisor. My mother called me the week after the settlement. She'd known about the trust fund, not the details of the withdrawals, she said, but she'd known it existed. She said she thought my father was handling it appropriately. She said she was sorry. She said it more than once. I believed her, and I also understood that believing her didn't mean she protected me when she could have. Those two things coexisted in a way I'm still learning to hold. We talk now. Carefully, occasionally. She's in a small apartment near my aunt. She seems quieter than she used to be. Garrett texted me about 4 months after the settlement. He said he wanted to explain. I didn't respond for a week, and when I did, I said I wasn't ready to talk, but that I appreciated him reaching out. He's been making the repayment installments on time. I know because they come as direct deposits with a memo line that just says his name. I don't spend the money immediately. I let it sit for a few days first. I'm not sure why. Something about needing the distance. We're not close. We're not estranged. We're two people who are slowly, cautiously figuring out what the other one means to them now. My dad called once, about 2 months after the settlement. I let it go to voicemail. He said he hoped I was doing well. He said families go through hard things. He said he loved me. I listened to it 3 times. I haven't called back. I think about my grandmother a lot. About what she knew and what she built and why she put my father in charge of protecting it. I've wondered if she trusted him to do the right thing, or if she knew he might not and put the trust in writing precisely because of that. Arthur told me once, when I asked him directly, that my grandmother had said she wanted to make sure Serena has something that is hers and hers alone. She knew, maybe. She tried to protect me. It wasn't enough, but she tried. The jewelry box she left me is on my dresser. Small, wooden, painted pale green with a bird on the lid. Her mother had kept earrings in it. I keep the card Arthur gave me at the funeral inside it now, folded up. I don't know why. It feels important to keep. I left my second job 8 months ago. I took the settlement funds and paid off the remainder of my student loans, put a chunk into an investment account, and kept 3 months of expenses liquid in savings. The first time I checked my balance after all of that and saw a number that didn't make me feel sick, I sat on my couch for a long time and didn't do anything at all. I still work at the restaurant sometimes, not because I have to, but because I like it. The kitchen is loud and fast and completely honest. Nobody is pretending anything in the middle of a dinner rush. Everyone is just doing the thing. There's something I find genuinely restful about that, even when it's hard. My apartment is small, but it's mine. I have 2 plants that are alive. I'm learning to cook things I actually want to eat, rather than whatever was cheapest. These are not dramatic victories. They feel like them anyway. The notification sound from my brother's text was a video of his dog doing something goofy. No message attached. I watched it twice in the restaurant parking lot after my shift. I didn't respond that night. The next morning, I sent back a single laughing emoji. It's not forgiveness exactly. Or maybe it is, in the small, everyday form it actually takes. Not a speech, not a moment. Just a laughing emoji at 7:30 in the morning before the day begins. My grandmother kept her own counsel. I've been learning to do the same. To decide quietly. To act when I'm ready. To not explain myself to people who weren't paying attention. She left me the trust because she believed I was worth protecting. It took a fight to claim it. But I claimed it, and they never saw that coming. I've thought a lot about what actually made my father believe he could do what he did for as long as he did it. And the honest answer isn't that he was unusually evil or unusually bold. It's that nobody ever made him stop. Every year that passed without consequence was a year that confirmed to him that he was safe. That's how it works. Not with a dramatic choice, but with a slow accumulation of small decisions that go unchallenged. He didn't steal my trust fund in one moment. He did it in 12, spread across 9 years, each one a little easier than the last because nothing had ever pushed back. That's the part that stays with me. Not the anger, which has mostly faded, but the clarity about how people justify things to themselves when the cost stays invisible. My father told himself, probably, that the money would eventually be repaid, that family finances are fluid, that I was fine, that I was managing, that I didn't need it the way Garrett did. He looked at me working 2 jobs and eating cereal for dinner and saw evidence that I was capable, not evidence that I was struggling. It's a convenient kind of blindness, and I think most people who take from others have a version of it. What I didn't understand for a long time was that my silence fed it, not because I owed him a confrontation, but because I had been trained from a very young age to smooth things over, to smile at the dinner table, to clap at the right moments, to ask for less than I needed so that the atmosphere stayed comfortable. I was good at it. I thought it was maturity. It wasn't. It was just a habit I'd built to survive in a house where making noise cost more than staying quiet. My grandmother, Ruth, understood something about that. She couldn't change the family I grew up in, but she could lead me something that was legally, formally, documentably mine, something that required effort and witness to take away. She built a structure around it precisely because she knew that informal promises inside families dissolve when they become inconvenient. She was right. And what she gave me wasn't just money. It was the first time anyone had said, in writing, that I was worth protecting. When Patricia walked me through the settlement terms, she said something I've turned over many times since. She said, "The law is just a formalization of what's fair. You already knew what was fair. You just needed the paperwork to prove it." I think that's true of most things. The knowing comes first. The evidence just makes it possible to act. I'm not the same person who sat at that dinner table watching my brother grin at a set of car keys. I'm not harder, exactly, but I'm more honest. With myself about what I need, with others about what I'm willing to accept. I ask questions now before I assume good faith. I read documents before I sign them. I keep records. These sound like small things. They have changed my life more than anything else. Garrett is still figuring out who he is in all of this. I think he's genuinely trying. I also think people can be complicit in something without fully understanding what they're doing, and then have to live with the understanding once it arrives. That's its own kind of weight. I don't need to add to it. What I keep coming back to is this. Nobody handed me the outcome of this story. I had to be willing to pursue it when I was exhausted and scared and not sure it would work. The result came from that, from deciding, quietly and without announcing it, that I was not going to let what was mine disappear without a fight. That decision was mine. So was everything that came from it.